Boa noite a todos, sejam bem-vindos a mais uma sessão comentada do XVI Fantaspoa, que está acontecendo online do Darkflix até domingo, dia 2 de agosto. E quem quiser assinar o canal aqui do YouTube ou se conectar com a gente através das redes sociais, estamos respondendo os interessados. Beleza? Estamos aqui com o diretor Boaz Yakin, que vai falar conosco sobre o seu filme Aviva. So, good night, Boaz. Thank you for joining us to talk a little bit about Aviva.
Good evening.
So, I think that we can talk about the film in general, starting by its beginning.
Sure.
Since the moment you start the film, you make it clear that's not an unusual film, and it's quite different from any other film that you made before, because many of them have been released in Brazil, and I think you know that, and many of them have been had a very good box office, and this for me it's a very passionate and intimate project. How was that transition?
Well, you know, it's interesting. It's an interesting question because to me, of course, this is definitely the most experimental and different film from anything I've done. But the truth is that the films that I've done that I'm most known for are in a lot of ways truly the most unusual things for me. Like, it's just that those are the things that get out there a lot. You know what I mean? And it's kind of an ironic thing to be known for the kinds of movies that you're in a way least interested in. And, you know, my first film was an independent film called Fresh, and I made a film called Christ Above Rubies after. And every once in a while I go in and try and make a commercial film so that I can pay the bills and keep a roof over my head and stay in the business and all that. But the scripts that I've written, the kind of the work that I've done on the side that I really try and get involved with is much more independent and experimental. It's just that those things don't get out there as much. So I'm really happy to be able to get a movie like Aviva seen, because it really represents much more the kinds of things I'm interested in doing.
And on that point, since the beginning, we have that opening shot, which is amazing. And how did you had the choice, and how did you write the script for having more than one actor for the characters?
Well, that's what the film is really about to me. It's a very personal film, which I hope can be universal as well. But it's a very personal film, and that, you know, I've found in my life that in my relationships that the biggest struggle that I've had is within the masculine and feminine sides of myself. And all the time that I thought I was having problems with my partner, 90% of the time it's because I wasn't at peace with myself and I wasn't able to relate to the other person in the right way because I didn't know which part of me was reacting and which part of me was upset with the other. So I've been wanting to make a film about the struggle in the self in a relationship. And I saw, you know, there's a beautiful film by Louis Buñuel, funny and very sarcastic film called That Obscure Object of Desire, where he uses two actresses to play the same woman, to kind of give you a sense that she's very hard to understand from the point of view of the main character, and he never knows who's going to show up in his life when he sees her. Anyway, so I wanted to take that a step further and show two people playing the same person, but do it in a very theatrical way, not in a movie like Fight Club or something where like one of them is an aspect of the imagination of the real person, you know what I mean? But to just have two actors playing two sides of somebody, and if other people are in the scene, they would talk to both of them as if it's two different people. And as I was writing it, I decided that I would do that with both of the two main characters. At first, I thought it might only be one of them. But then I went, no, it's going to be both of them. So I kind of came to it through the process of that exploration.
I think that the fact that you choose to go with both brings so much to the film. It wouldn't be the same thing if you had made it just with one of them.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. You know, and it's interesting. You know, I had been wanting to make a film with movement and dance. You know, my family, my parents are pantomimes and acting teachers. My father and mother taught acting at Juilliard for 50 years.
Amazing.
And they teach movement. Everything that they do is movement. So I grew up with movement theater a lot, but I never really fully explored that in a film. And I'd been wanting to make a film that dealt with movement and dance, but I didn't know what the story was. And I'd been wanting to make a film with this duality that we're talking about. And I was sitting down with a friend of mine who was a dancer a long time ago, and told him about these two things I wanted to explore. And he said, well, why don't you make that the dance movie? And it just opened up the door in my mind. And once that door was open, it just gave me the freedom to do anything I wanted in the context of the film. You know, I feel that movies, especially American films, and you have so many rules when you make them, so many strictures. You're in a box so much. What genre are you doing? Does it all work, or is it tonally? You know, does it all work tonally? Is the tone working? And I really just wanted to throw all that out and just do a film where you could try anything that came to your mind. And that's definitely what I tried to do with this film.
And I think that this comes so clear. This is clear since the first shot, but I think the moment where Eden says that he would like to have a song at that moment is like, fuck you, American cinema.
Yeah, a little bit. Like, you know, I'm just. We worry so much about. You know, it's a word that you hear a lot when you're developing films, and I've used it. I'm as guilty as anybody. But does it work?
Yeah.
Does it work? Does this work? Does that work? Does the story work? Does the character work? Is the script working? And at a certain point, you're like, man, I remember telling stories to my little brother when we were kids. We would walk in the park, and I would just tell him for a story for 2 hours from the top of my head. And I was not worrying about whether it fucking worked. I was just trying to express myself and entertain him and give him any idea that I could. And I wanted to get away from that in this film, from this idea that everything has to work. You know, hopefully it's enjoyable and it gives you insight and you can gain something out of it. But, you know, the hell with that whole does it work thing, as far as I'm concerned.
So, I would like to talk a little bit about the cinematography because it's amazing. And some scenes are a real work of art, and you can see them like some of the scenes where you chose to use like the lights or the colors, they're real compositions.
Well, listen, you know, I have a lot of experience at this point, even though in a lot of ways this is the youngest film I've ever made. And I found myself working with a number of it's the youngest crew, the smallest crew and the youngest crew I ever worked with. And the young director of photography who made this film is a young Russian DP called Arseny Khachaturin. And I think he's really brilliant. And I don't really always say that. There are a lot of talented people working in film, but this guy is something really special. And you know, he had the tiniest, it was just him holding the camera, a focus puller, and then indoor scenes, one guy to move lights around. That's all. It was a crew of 3. And we found a way to discuss the look and the feeling of the film. And I think a lot of the fact that the movie looks so great is thanks to Arseny.
So, and about the dance and the movement, okay? You just mentioned that many times in American cinema, we've seen the same film being remade over and over, and you're following the same procedure. And honestly, between Fantaspoa and everything, I'd say that I watch about 500 films a year.
That's a lot.
Yeah, it's a lot. And I've never seen a film where the dance takes the story forward.
Yeah, I mean, the closest I've ever, the greatest example of it to a certain degree in a very big, grand way is West Side Story. But normally dance is very like, you get to a certain point in the emotion, and then the dance just shows you what the emotion is of the characters or what the feeling is. The dance isn't the thing that's telling you the story about what's happening. Every once in a while it does in a film, but generally it doesn't. And I really wanted to do something different with dance than has ever been done before in a narrative film. And, they make many amazing short dance films. I was very influenced by a film, I can't remember the name of the director, but there's a guy from England who has a company called Deviate, and he's made some short dance films like called The Cost of Living, and a few things. And the dance, and it's so interesting, but they're not really narrative films with stories. And I really wanted to make a film where the dance wasn't showbiz dance, even as much as I love Bob Fosse, it's still, of course, showbiz dance. And I really wanted to make a film where the dance was an integral part of the story, and where often you weren't telling the story with anything other than the movement. And Bobby Smith, who was the choreographer and co-star, is a very unique dancer. She and her husband Orr co-choreographed the film together. And we were really able to find a way to do it, and I think in a way that it's never been done in a film. And I'm very proud of that.
Yeah, on that sense, let's say, if you think about West Side Story, it has some amazing dances in it, but you also have the songs. So here, I think that's the difference, because you don't have the songs, you have just the dance.
Just the dance.
And my next question was exactly about who did the choreography and how was to create something that mixes so much and so well with the story.
Well, like I said, Bobby Jean Smith, who is an incredible choreographer and dancer, who plays the female version of Eden, did the choreography.
The one that she opens the film, right?
She opens the film, she's sitting on the bed, right? That's Bobby. There's a documentary about her called Bobby Jean. She danced with a very famous Israeli company called Batsheva, and she practices a style called Gaga dancing, which a lot of people know. She also her agenda is very much to create dances that are expressive and come from emotion and storytelling and aren't show off. Like they aren't, it's not about how, of course it looks beautiful, but it's about what's coming from the inside and how it's being expressed. And when she read the script, she just wanted to make the film. And I have to say that when she came on, she was like a 50-50. This movie is her movie too. Like it's 50-50 in the sense that you see how much movement and dance and physicality there is in the movie. And that all comes from her and her group of people that she brought on to work on the film. So it was a true collaboration.
Okay. There are some scenes in the film that obviously took a lot of work to create. Like the scene with the boys, I can imagine how much work did it took you. And to end
one day of shooting, my friend.
One day?
Well, except for the Coney Island shot at the end.
And the Coney Island, and that was exactly my follow-up.
That was its own thing. I mean, I'm really proud of the fact that we made the movie on such a tiny budget. I mean, it was a lot for me because I financed it, but it was made for no money. And we shot in Paris, in New York, in Los Angeles, in Coney Island, everywhere. And we were able to do it for so little. But yeah, getting those boys out there in the middle of the streets in New York and just shooting, it was a trip. And we stole everything. I mean, we didn't really have permits.
That was my question too.
You're not allowed to shoot on the subway, So like when they're dancing and running around on the subway, we were just like, let's get on the subway and shoot,
And it's such an amazing scene.
I have to say that, I of course come from the day when we used to shoot on film. And I was dragged kicking and screaming into the digital age. I was so unhappy about it. And of course, film, even great digital photography doesn't look as good as even middle film photography looked. But I've been trying to make independent films And I made a film called Boarding School a few years ago that's pretty unique in its own way, and this film. And in order to make films at the budgets that we're making these small films for now, you could never have done it on film. Never.
Never.
Like, I could have never made Aviva on film. And the thing is, it's not just that the film is more expensive or that the camera, it's that you need more light, so you need a bigger crew, so you need more people. Suddenly you can't use that small apartment anymore. You have to get a big apartment. Suddenly you have to get that. And it just, this domino effect. And suddenly a film that you can make for $500,000, you would have to make for $3 million or $4 million, right? So as much as I miss the fact that film looks so beautiful, I don't miss it at all anymore. I'm so done with it. Because the kind of things that, like, we could just get on the subway with a camera this big and shoot a bunch of people dancing on the subway. We shot things in the airport when Aviva's flying to New York and getting on and we shot on an airplane. No one knew we were shooting our movie on the airplane. We just fucking went out and shot our movie on the airplane with a camera this big, and the quality is really quite beautiful. So I think that's a real blessing about the digital age. I think for independent filmmakers, it's a real blessing.
And when you were mentioning about film, people who have never worked with film or who have no idea, doesn't have an idea of how expensive it is, or simply how heavy the camera was, and how it would be impossible. Really, it's not difficult. It would be impossible to get many of the shots that you have here.
Impossible, like just the amount of room between the film camera and the first thing that you can point it at, the amount of light that, even with fast film, the amount of light that you need in order to get a decent image or a nice looking image, it's just a whole different world. It's a whole different world.
So there are 2 questions here.
Do you want to read it?
Okay. Is there an intimate and particular construction of the story, whether in the script or in the construction of the characters by the actors? What's the barrier between reality and fiction?
Well, I'm not 100% sure I'm sure it's written from someone in Portuguese into English about what you mean by an intimate and particular construction of the story. I wrote, look, the script is very much influenced by my emotions, my experiences, and my feelings about my relationships. That being said, once I started writing it, it became a work of fiction. So that even if I drew on things that happened or similar things or feelings, I was changing everything. It's a dance film. It's like I'm compressing time, I'm compressing elements, I'm combining people that are 2 people into 1 person. I'm doing so I feel like once the work on the script starts, once the work on the story starts, the responsibility starts to go toward the story and not toward what happened in life or anything like that. And in terms of the actors, the actors contributed a tremendous amount in terms of the movement, the way they performed, and all that. But they very much followed the script as it was written.
Perfect. One person here is saying that Russians are the best, and they are especially happy when an American director says that.
And we also had a fantastic Russian actress in it who plays Aviva. Even though in the film she's supposed to be French, if you had an ear for accents in English, you would hear that she actually has a Russian accent, and we didn't even try and make it sound like a French accent. And she's Russian. Her name is Zina Zinchenko.
And he even kids about that in one of the scenes. That's a very nice touch.
And she is a fantastic dancer, and she really made the film.
She's amazing. She really kept both of them, the 4 of them.
Yeah, but she's a very charismatic person.
You can see how pretty much everybody falls in love with her, and especially once she begins to work, and you could see how lit up she was, and
Yeah,
how
how
everybody,
gifted.
yes, and she realizes that. I think that one of the most interesting things in the film is the moment where she realizes that she was fading due to him, and once she's back, there's no way for me that they could be together.
Yeah. Yeah, they can be friends, but they can't continue what they were doing before, which is
Oh,
true of a lot of relationships.
a lot.
No matter how much we love each other and how much we support each other, sometimes we don't know how to make it work together as two people who are able to grow together. But if you're able to stay friends and stay connected and support each other, I think then it's a successful relationship, even if it doesn't work as a couple.
Yeah, and what?
Marcello writes bodies talk in this movie. They really do, and that's again thanks to Bobby and to Orr and all the actors. Their bodies, they really are expressive. And the other thing that was, of course, important about working with dancers and not with normal actors is how much sexuality there is in the movie. There's so much sex, there's so much nudity, and you can never get an American actor to do those things. They're too self-conscious. They have too much concern about their career and how it's going to look and da da da. So the fact that I was working with dancers who have danced nude before, who are, it's not that they're not sensitive and that it's not something you have to be very respectful about and careful about and all that, but they are more physical, they are more expressive, and they're more open to exploring things like that than your normal actors here. So that was very important as well.
And I think that in that sense, one of the amazing things in the film is how natural everything is. Because we are usually so private with our nudity, and in the film, you have those scenes when they are just very young children, and the scenes where the naked father is holding the baby, and that's so expressive and that's so human. We created so many layers of things that like prevent us to be real, and
Hmm.
in the film I think that's one of the things you do. You make people real.
Yeah. And I mean, and I think it's such, like you're saying, it's such a natural part of life. And we've put such we've created such a distance between ourselves and that. And it's been interesting having conversations with people where, like, I have friends, or, there's some people who appreciate what you just talked about. And then there are some people who are like, wow, there's too much sex, there's too much nudity for me. Sometimes more is less. Sometimes more is less. I mean, less is more. I'm sorry. Sometimes less is more. And you're like, man, you will sit there and watch some action film where people shoot each other in the head for 2 hours. I mean, you watch a John Wick film, you can go, you can make dinner, you can come back, and the people are still shooting each other in the head from the same scene, right? And people aren't sitting there going, you know what, less is more. Maybe you can just show them start to fight and then go to the window, and when you come back, everyone's lying on the ground, and we don't see what happens. Why should we see what happens? No one's saying that, right? But when it comes to sexuality and telling a story about how we relate to each other physically and emotionally, people, it's too intimate for people. It's too difficult, and that's something that I really wanted to challenge with this movie.
And I think that it comes from, at least from my perspective, the thing you said in the very beginning about the fact that we have a female side inside us, and women have a male side inside them, and you expose that so clearly in the film. And honestly, it might be my perception, but I think that people who are offended by it or that don't relate to the film are people that have problems with,
Yeah,
you know.
I agree. But that's okay. It's good to challenge
Yeah,
those things.
yeah, no, it's nice. In that sense, there is one very particular question that I'd like to make, and it's okay if you don't want to answer. But today I watched it for the second time, and I watched it with subtitles.
Ah, okay.
And I was with a very intriguing. And like two-part question. Why did you choose to wrap up the film in the park? And in that sense, is he the little girl or not? Or is that just in my mind?
No, I chose to wrap it up in the park because I used that moment from his childhood symbolically as the moment where he realized that you can be fooled, that you can't trust yourself, that you lose your innocence in a way when things that you just accept are one way are questioned. And it's a symbolic moment earlier in the film where like suddenly he realizes his own confusion about his gender and his I don't mean gender, but his inner masculine and feminine. So for me, I wanted to wrap the movie up in the same place where he had kind of lost his innocence. I wanted him to find his innocence again and to start to be able to make friends with that aspect of himself over there. Finally, by being friends with Aviva, he's finally able to find that friendship in himself. But I mean, I don't think he's the little girl. I think he was a little boy who was confused by the little girl and was never quite the same again.
So yeah, that was what was for me. I haven't thought about that the first time, but when I saw it this time, I was thinking, might this be happening here? Because he feels so confused, and I think it's the way that they just are together after he and Aviva say goodbye to each other. It's so tender. It's so real.
You know what I did on purpose to confuse the issue even more is the little girl is played by a little boy and the little boy is played by a little girl.
That's so great.
Because at that age, you really can't tell the difference. You know what I mean? So little Eden is played by a little boy, by a little girl, and that other kid, whoever he is played by the girl is played by a little boy.
That's so nice. So there is one question here. We talked a little about it, but I think you can expand a little bit. I will translate the best I can, okay?
Okay.
Mariana says that he was impressed by all the choreography in the film. So she would like to know, how was your relationship to the choreographer? And about, since she's a dancer and an actress, and how did you made her express her story?
Well, we had a very, very good relationship, but I will say this, which was one of the interesting things about the film, is that we had such a short period of pre-production on this film because she had certain things she had to do, that she actually only had 6 weeks in order to prepare all these dances that you see in the film. And this is a lot of dancing in this film. This is not like a couple of little things. This is like a few major dances. And I needed time to see what the hell she was doing so I could figure out how I was going to shoot it. And she very much liked to have her own space at the beginning in order to develop things before showing them so that she could, but I didn't have time to let that develop. So there was definitely pressure between us because she wanted space and time to develop her dances, and I needed to see what she was doing in order to figure out even what kind of camera to use or how to shoot them. So we were both very tense a lot in preparing the dances. And in fact, sometimes some of the pieces that you see were almost only finished on the day that we shot them. Like the whole last dance in the park, she made in the park while I was shooting the scene with the little kids. And I didn't even see what she was doing until she showed it to me and I went, okay, this is what we're gonna do. Like it was a very organic process, it was very organic. And in terms of bringing her as an actress out, she acted in one film before, but I really think that it was just a matter with all of these dancer actors. finding a place that was truthful and personal to them and letting them go, because they're not experienced the way your normal actors are, who like prepare all kinds of histories. I don't know. I wasn't interested in that in this film. I really wanted to find people who were just going to be honest and truthful in the scenes that they were in. And Bobby is a very truthful person. She finds it very hard not to be truthful. So she was able to find truth in what she was doing in the scenes and work with that.
So it's been quite interesting because the film, I don't know if you are aware, but Fantaspoa is actually a genre film festival. Usually you play more horror.
It's a different film for Fantaspoa.
Yeah, and it was a risk that you were taking with us and that we were taking playing Aviva. And it's amazing because the feedback from the audience is they are just loving it. Nicholas is saying that he loves Aviva, and one journalist, he saw 33 films and he put Aviva in his top 10 films of the festival.
Fantastic.
And there was one comment that I thought was very interesting, that one girl says it's the best relationship film she's seen since Closer.
Wow, that's a very big compliment. I really appreciate that. Yeah, and I think what's interesting about Aviva breaking genres the way it does, I mean, when you have a festival like Fantaspoa, it's like, I think that even in genre films, people can get caught up in what is the genre and what box it's in. And like, part of the joy of horror films, of fantasy films, right, is that they can connect, like what I think the beauty of good horror films, especially the beauty of the horror film genre in general, is that it can connect you into a dreamlike state or a dreamlike place and have a dream logic in the film that other genres don't necessarily have. When you watch some great horror films, whether it's Eyes Without a Face or Psycho or Evil Dead or like Texas Chainsaw Massacre, like they're so different from each other. But one of the things that they all have is that they flow like your nightmares flow. They don't tell stories the way, script writers who are writing Hollywood movies write them. They tell stories in a more emotional and impressionistic way that reflects a dreamlike state, which is why I love horror films and I love genre films. But lately, once people start making money on these things and it becomes a business, suddenly genre films become boxed in even more than other films. And it's like, what's a horror film has to have this, and this in it. And what's a fantasy film has to have this in it. And it's more boring than When Harry Met Sally, because, it's got more rules at this point. And I think that I'm thrilled that you put Aviva there, because although it's not what you'd call a fantasy film, I think that it treats storytelling the way certain fantasy films or movies that I love that have gone into those areas have gone, have done. So I'm really glad and I'm really proud to have the film at a festival like that.
Thank you so much. It's great to have the film. Honestly, I'm a fan of the film, and it's great to be able to bring it to the audience in Brazil.
Thank you, man.
Boaz, do you want to say something else to the audience in Brazil?
No, just thank you very much for seeing it, especially at a genre festival, a horror and fantasy festival. I really appreciate it, and I'm very, very happy to be able to show it in Brazil, far away from here, to people who are approaching film and life from a completely fresh and different perspective from here, although we share certain troubles and similarities, of course, the way we were talking before. But I'm really thrilled for you to get a chance to see it, and I'm very thankful.
It's a pleasure. It was a pleasure talking to you, and I do hope to bring you more Boaz films in the future and to bring you to Brazil.
Yes, one day when we can move up out of our apartments, it'll be great to be there. Thank you, JP.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Good night.